What if the man everyone laughed at was the only one who could save them? When a dusty pickup rolled onto a luxury tarmac and a grease-stained mechanic stepped out, the suits behind the glass burst into quiet laughter. He wasn't on any VIP list. He wasn't wearing a name tag. He didn't even look like he belonged near a private jet. But in the next few minutes, he would expose a deadly mistake, silence a room full of experts, and change the life of a billionaire forever. They laughed when they saw the truck. It was a beat-up '99 Ford, dragging years of sun and work behind it like a tired dog. Rust framed the wheel wells. The bed was cluttered with spare parts, coffee cups, and one stubborn red toolbox that hadn't shut properly in years. The whole thing coughed and wheezed as it rolled past the velvet-lined fences of Clearwater Executive Airfield. Inside the glass terminal, men in suits paused their calls. One of them raised his brow. "That can't be for us." Another chuckled. "Maybe someone called a lawn guy by mistake." But the truck kept coming, and when it stopped near the hangar, the door creaked open, and out stepped a man who looked like he'd just crawled out from under a tractor. Hank Mercer. A mechanic, not the polished, clipboard-carrying kind. The real kind. Oil beneath the fingernails, wrists dark with old grease, flannel shirt washed thin from years, not style. He looked like he belonged in a garage behind a diner, not beside a multi-million-dollar jet. And yet, there he was, moving slow, calm, like someone who knew exactly where he was and didn't care who didn't like it. A hush fell over the lounge just for a second as the executives inside exchanged glances. "Unbelievable," one muttered. "He better not touch it," said another. "No way he even gets clearance to open the engine," a third added, smirking. But through it all, one person didn't join the chorus. Evelyn Stroud, owner of the jet, CEO of Stroud Aviation, daughter of a legend, granddaughter of a war pilot. She had grown up in hangars and on tarmacs, learning metal before she learned makeup. Her company ran one of the largest private fleets in the country. But that morning, she wasn't a mogul. She was simply a woman watching a man everyone else had dismissed. She stood near the back of the lounge, arms folded, coffee untouched. Her staff whispered nearby, their laughter low but sharp. "Why is he walking like that? God, look at his boots. Did anyone even vet him?" Evelyn didn't move, but her gaze sharpened as Hank dropped his toolbox beside the jet and knelt. He didn't look around, didn't wave or ask for instructions. He just opened the engine panel and paused. The pause wasn't long, but it was telling, because to a trained eye, it wasn't confusion. It was recognition. Then he moved, quickly but without panic. Gloved hands reached into the belly of the machine. He checked connections, pulled a flashlight from his back pocket, removed a cracked clamp and held it to the light like a jeweler inspecting a flawed gem. Inside the terminal, no one noticed. They were too busy filming. Someone had pulled out a phone. "This'll go viral," they joked. Backwoods Hank saves the jet. Laughter again. The smug, lazy kind, the kind that feels safe behind glass. But Evelyn saw it. The shift in Hank's shoulders, the way he leaned slightly closer, the way his hand froze for just a second as he touched a frayed wire too close to the ignition coil. She knew that posture, that silence. He wasn't repairing, he was preventing a disaster. And still, he didn't say a word, no shouting, no blaming, no grandstanding, just fingers moving with the quiet urgency of someone who's worked more with risk than with comfort. Back inside, Garrett Vance, her COO, stepped beside her. Polished as always, tie straight, eyes cold. "Want me to tell him to stop? We can call an official team." "No," she said, voice low. "But Evelyn," I said no. She didn't look at him. She just kept watching, like someone trying to remember the exact name of a storm on the horizon. Outside, Hank had pulled out new clamps, replaced corroded ones with firm, deliberate clicks. Wiped away old residue with the edge of his sleeve. He worked fast, not recklessly, but like someone who knew seconds mattered more than optics. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the loose pages of a repair log someone had dropped nearby. The suited men looked out again, this time quieter. And then someone said, barely above a whisper, "He's not supposed to be here." But another voice, shaky now, added, "Then why does he look like he's the only one who belongs?" Evelyn's eyes didn't blink. In that moment, nothing about Hank Mercer made sense on paper. He wasn't certified by their list, he wasn't recommended by any elite. But somehow, the jet, her jet, seemed to respond to him like an old horse recognizing the only rider who ever rode it right. And in less than 10 minutes, something would shift. The laughter would stop, the silence would thicken, and Evelyn Stroud would walk through those doors and ask one question that would echo louder than any engine. But not yet. For now it was just a man in worn boots, a broken machine, and a woman who saw past the dirt. And that, quietly, was where everything began. The jet wasn't just damaged, it was a ticking coffin. Hank didn't say it out loud, he didn't need to. The evidence was clear. The fuel line had been scorched, insulation gone, and a leak creeping dangerously close to the ignition coil. One spark. That's all it would have taken. No protocol, no backup, no team of engineers on standby. Just him. He didn't sigh, he didn't curse. He just reached deeper into the heart of the aircraft and got to work. Inside the lounge, the laughter had thinned. Someone had stopped recording. Even the staff began to shift. Half curious now, half nervous. One man whispered, "Shouldn't he have someone helping?" But Hank moved like he had 10 hands. Socket wrench in one, flashlight gripped in his mouth, a replacement clamp already spinning into place with practiced ease. His motions were sharp, confident, but never rushed. It wasn't a performance. He didn't know he was being watched. And even if he did, it wouldn't have mattered. The airport staff, who'd once laughed behind camera lenses, now peeked out through windows. Their phones were still in their hands, but no one recorded anymore. Something about the man's presence made it feel wrong, like interrupting a sacred ritual. Across the runway, Evelyn stood near the glass, motionless. She could see everything. The corrosion, the missing fasteners, the blatant oversight. Her pilot had told her it was an internal electrical glitch. But Evelyn had grown up fixing her father's crop dusters in Georgia summers. She knew better. What she saw now was sabotage or incompetence, and either way, it had almost cost lives. The man outside hadn't flinched. He hadn't asked who owned the jet. He hadn't even looked up when people snickered. He just fixed it. Bolt by bolt, wire by wire. At one point, a junior staffer behind her asked quietly, "Should we call security?" Evelyn didn't turn. She simply said, "No. He's the only one who's done anything useful all morning." The jet's underbelly gave a low hum, then a light blinked, one of the red emergency signals. It dimmed, then blinked again, but this time slower, more rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Hank exhaled through his nose, not done yet, but close. He slid back beneath the fuselage, crawled toward the auxiliary control panel, and rewired a loose circuit someone else had carelessly patched with a tie wrap. "Amateurs," he muttered under his breath. His voice wasn't angry, just tired, like someone who had cleaned up one mess too many. By now, silence had taken over the lounge. The men in suits weren't sipping coffee anymore. They weren't mocking, or joking, or taking pictures. They were just watching. Some standing. Others whispering things they didn't quite understand. Phrases like magneto relay and pressure regulators, suddenly made real in the hands of someone who could tame them. And then, the engine purred. Not roared, not coughed, purred, smooth, alive. It was the sound of a machine breathing again, of something once close to death quietly waking back up. Inside, a man finally broke the silence. That should have taken hours. Another shook his head, eyes wide. How did he even know where to start? Evelyn didn't say a word. She already knew. Hank stood up slowly, wiped his hands on a cloth that had once been white. He checked his work, triple-confirmed the stability of the system, then lowered the panel and locked it tight. He didn't smile, he didn't wave. He just closed his toolbox and turned to leave. It was over. Or so he thought. Then the jet's door hissed open. It wasn't loud, but the sound sliced through the morning air like thunder. The crowd turned. Even Hank paused. Metal stairs unfolded, their joints clicking like clockwork. And then a sound no one expected. Heels. Slow, deliberate, echoing against steel. Evelyn Stroud stepped onto the tarmac. Every eye followed her descent. She wasn't dressed for warmth. Tailored navy suit, gold buttons catching the morning sun, hair pinned back in a no-nonsense twist. She looked like a woman born into empires, carved out of legacy. But as she reached the bottom step, there was something else in her eyes, something no one in that building had ever seen before. Stillness. She didn't look at the executives. She didn't glance at her assistant. She walked straight toward the man wiping oil from his fingers. Hank didn't move. Not from pride, not from fear. Just stillness matching hers. Two storms circling the same quiet air. 15 steps. That's all it took for her to close the distance between wealth and work boots. When she reached him, the world held its breath. "You fixed it," she said, her voice barely above the wind. Hank blinked once. "Yes, ma'am." "You didn't just fix it, you saved it." He said nothing. He didn't need to. And Evelyn Stroud, CEO, legacy builder, aviation royal, looked at a mechanic covered in grease and saw something she hadn't seen in years. A man who didn't ask for recognition, who didn't flinch under judgment, who simply did the job, right and without applause. The others watched from behind the glass, stunned. But out here on the tarmac, nothing else existed. Only a woman who had everything, and a man who had nothing to prove. The silence on the tarmac wasn't awkward, it was seismic. Evelyn Stroud stood face to face with the mechanic who had just saved her jet, her name, and maybe even her legacy. She didn't ask for credentials, she didn't demand a report. She asked a question. "You didn't walk away," she said quietly. "No, ma'am," Hank replied just as calm. "You saw the leak?" she pressed, voice low enough that only the wind could overhear. "I saw everything," he said, nodding toward the sealed panel. "And someone nearly got you killed." She held his gaze, unblinking, as if confirming something she had suspected for a long time but never dared to say aloud. Inside the lounge, Garrett Vance's jaw tightened. He stepped forward toward the door, panic beginning to flash behind his well-trained smile. "Get her back inside," he barked at no one in particular. "This isn't the place." But Evelyn didn't look back. Behind her, the hangar lights flickered. Behind glass, men in navy suits shifted on polished loafers. And yet, she didn't turn around. She only looked at Hank, the one man out here who hadn't tried to impress her. "Do you know who I am?" she asked softly. "I do," Hank said. "You're Evelyn Stroud. You built one of the largest private fleets in the country. You're not impressed." "I'm not here to be impressed," Hank said, his voice even. "I'm here to fix problems." Something in her eyes flickered. A crack in the mask. Not the boardroom gaze, not the PR smirk. Something older, something tired. She stepped a little closer, lowering her voice even more. "I've spent my life surrounded by men who talk big and do little," she said. "You're the first one who did the opposite. I was just doing my job, and everyone else was watching you do it." Another pause. Then Evelyn turned. Not just to glance, but fully, slowly, deliberately. She faced the wall of glass where her team stood watching like ghosts behind a barrier. Her voice rose, not loud, but unmistakable. Everyone inside. Now, no one moved. At first, then like dominoes, the suits scattered. Her assistant looked startled. Garrett's lips parted like he wanted to object, but then thought better of it. The terminal doors clicked shut behind them. Now it was just the two of them. No cameras, no microphones, just oil stains, wind, and a machine that still buzzed faintly with life. "You risked your life out here," she said. "I don't walk away from fire hazards." Another beat of silence, and then she smiled. A real smile, small, unpolished, almost uncertain. It startled her as much as it did him. He didn't smile back, not yet. Her eyes scanned his face, dusty, sweat-lined, unmoved. "You want a drink?" she asked. "I don't drink while I'm on call. You're off the clock now." "Doesn't feel like it." She let out a short breath through her nose, almost a laugh but not quite. "You don't make things easy." "I'm not supposed to," Hank said. She folded her arms across her chest, but not defensively. More like she was bracing herself. "What would you do," she asked slowly, "if someone like me asked you something completely insane?" Hank's eyes narrowed, not unkindly. "That depends." "How insane are we talking?" She took a step forward. The distance between them shrank to inches. He didn't move. "What if I asked you to come with me?" she said. "Right now. Not as a mechanic, not as a name, just as you." He looked at her for a long time, the kind of look a man gives when he's reading more than words. He was trying to find the lie, but he didn't see one. "And go where?" he finally asked. "Somewhere the suits won't follow." He raised an eyebrow. "You're serious? As a heart attack?" She wasn't joking. Her eyes didn't flinch. Her breath wasn't steady. "I don't have a spare suit," Hank said flatly. "I don't want a man in a suit." She studied him like a mechanic studies an engine, looking for the one loose bolt that might throw it all off. "You want to disappear?" he asked. "No," she said. "I want to reappear, but with someone who doesn't care who I'm supposed to be." That's when Hank finally smiled. It wasn't wide, it wasn't charming, it was quiet, real. "You don't even know me," he said. "That's why I'm asking," she replied. Behind them, the terminal was still. Phones still recording, glass still separating. But outside, something irreversible had begun. Two people, no script, no titles, just one question that shattered the entire stage. What if I asked you to leave all this behind, with me? And in that moment, for the first time in either of their lives, nothing else mattered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind blew soft across the tarmac. Somewhere in the distance, a seagull cried over the dull roar of an arriving jet. The world around them was moving, but the space between Hank and Evelyn felt suspended, quiet, raw, and unguarded. "You don't even know me," Hank said again, softer this time. Less a protest, more a confession. "That's why I'm asking," Evelyn repeated, her voice barely above the hum of the now stable jet behind them. He studied her face, not the makeup, not the posture, not the power she wore like a custom suit. He looked beneath it, at the tiredness around her eyes, the hesitation in her breath, the weight of someone who had carried too much for too long and didn't know how to put it down. "You really want to walk away from all this?" he asked. "I don't want to walk away," she replied. "I want to walk toward something real." He squinted, chewing on the thought. "Then take off your heels." Evelyn blinked. "What?" "If you're serious," Hank said, "take them off. Come walk with me. 5 minutes, no titles, no cameras, just ground under our feet." There was a beat of silence, and then she shifted her weight to one side, reached down, and unbuckled the first heel. The second followed. When she stood barefoot on the hot concrete, she looked more human than she ever had in front of any boardroom. Hank gave a small nod, then he turned. He didn't say where they were going. He just walked, and Evelyn followed. They passed the jet, the machine that had brought them together. They passed the glass terminal, where judgment still hovered like perfume. They passed the parked SUVs, the polished shoes, the curious glances. No one stopped them. No one dared. They walked in silence, her feet adjusting to heat, to dust, to discomfort. But she didn't complain. She didn't ask for help. Hank led her to the far side of the airfield, a place where most executives never bothered to look, to an old corrugated steel hangar, its paint peeling and its hinges rusted. A forgotten place, like the back room of a memory. He pulled a key from his pocket. The door creaked open. Inside was not what she expected. No neon lights, no tech, no staff waiting with clipboards. Just a folding table, a single battered chair, the faint smell of oil and old wood. On the walls, photos, dozens of them. Some framed, most curling at the corners, planes, hands holding wrenches, smiling men in coveralls. And in one photo, a little boy in overalls standing beside a tall man, older, sunburned, smiling like the world hadn't yet turned cruel. "My father built this place," Hank said. "Fixed planes here before the city moved the runways and called it obsolete." Evelyn turned slowly, taking it all in. She didn't speak. "He used to say dreams don't need power," Hank continued. "They run on grit." She looked at him, not at his hands or his boots or the grease on his neck, but at him, fully. Like someone seeing another person for the very first time. "Every man I've met," she said slowly, "wanted my empire." "I don't want your empire," Hank replied without pause. She nodded. "I know." He moved to the folding table and picked up a photo. His father, mid-laugh, holding a broken propeller like a trophy. "I don't know what you're used to," Hank said, "but if you're really offering something real, don't expect champagne. Expect scraped knuckles, cold coffee, meals eaten on metal boxes, days that smell like rubber and rain." Evelyn stepped closer, eyes on the photo. "That sounds perfect." And for the first time that day, Hank smiled, not out of charm, but belief. She reached for the other chair and sat, barefoot, in a suit that cost more than his truck, in a hangar that had no AC, no Wi-Fi, and no polished agenda. "You've got dirt on your cheek," he said. She wiped it, shrugged. "Good. Maybe it'll stick." They sat in silence for a long minute. Two people, unmasked, no audience, no performance. Outside, the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting gold through the cracks in the steel wall. It painted dust in amber, softened shadows into warmth. "I didn't come here today to find you," Evelyn whispered. "I know. But I'm not walking back without you." He looked at her. Not with surprise, not with fear, but with quiet understanding. "Then you better get used to early mornings and busted fingers," she smiled. "You better get used to me." The air inside the hangar was still. Dust floated lazily through shafts of sunlight, and Evelyn, barefoot and quiet, sat cross-legged on the concrete floor. Hank leaned against the far wall, wiping his hands with a rag that had seen better years. No cameras, no noise, no expectations, just peace. Until the black SUV pulled up. Hank noticed it first, the glint of tinted windows, the stiff posture of the driver. He stiffened, instincts sharp. Evelyn followed his gaze, and when she saw who stepped out, she slowly stood, brushing dust from her slacks. Garrett Vance. His suit was perfect, his hair even more so. He walked toward the hangar like a man entering a courtroom, not a workshop. Behind him, 2 assistants hovered, phones in hand. "Miss Stroud," he said, his voice measured but tight. "Thank God, we've been trying to reach you for hours." "I turned my phone off," Evelyn said plainly. "We have shareholders panicking, reporters outside the gates. Your name is trending on every business site." "I figured." Garrett looked past her toward Hank and his jaw tensed. "And this is?" Hank didn't flinch. He wiped his hands slowly and met Garrett's eyes. "Just the guy who kept her jet from exploding." Garrett gave a thin, practiced laugh. "Well," he said, "thank you for your service. But I believe Miss Stroud is ready to return to her actual life now." Evelyn didn't move. "You mean your version of it?" Garrett's smile twitched. "There are optics to consider, appearances. You're not just anyone, Evelyn. You're a Stroud. That means something." She took a slow breath, then stepped toward him. "I've been a Stroud since the day I was born," she said. "And for most of my life, that meant I didn't get to choose who I trusted, or who I let stand beside me." Her voice didn't rise, but the hangar felt heavier. Garrett tried to keep control. "There are deals on the table. Journalists outside. If you walk out with him—" She cut him off. "If I walk out with him, it'll be the first honest step I've taken in years." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the assistant stopped typing. Garrett's voice lost its polish. "This is reckless, Evelyn." "No," she said. "This is deliberate." His tone sharpened. "You can't just throw everything away for some mechanic." And then Hank stepped forward, not to argue, not to defend, just to speak. "I didn't ask her to throw anything away," he said. "I just fixed a problem everyone else ignored." Garrett scoffed. "You think that qualifies you to stand next to her?" Hank looked at Evelyn. "That's not my call to make." Evelyn's eyes never left Garrett. "You built an empire with me," he said. "You helped craft a brand that runs on image." "I'm done with image," she replied. "I want something that runs on truth." Garrett looked stunned. As if he hadn't heard her say a single thing she meant. "There are investors watching," he tried again. "There are headlines waiting." "I know," Evelyn said calmly. "Let them watch." She turned to Hank. "Come with me." "Where to?" She smiled. "Wherever they can't script us." He hesitated, then nodded once, and took her hand. Garrett took one final step forward, desperation starting to bleed through his corporate cool. "Evelyn, if you do this, they won't take you back." She turned back to him with a look so calm, it was terrifying. "I'm not going back." And with that, she stepped out of the hangar, barefoot, holding the hand of the man no one had expected. The sun outside was blinding. Cameras clicked like a storm. Reporters yelled her name. Phones pointed. But Evelyn didn't let go. She didn't flinch, because for the first time in years, she wasn't performing. She was simply being. And the world, for a moment, couldn't look away. The flashbulbs lit up like fireworks. As Evelyn Stroud stepped out of the old hangar, still barefoot, still holding the mechanic's hand, the media lost its mind. Cameras shuttered, microphones extended, reporters yelled her name with questions that weren't really questions, just noise. "Is this a publicity stunt? Miss Stroud, are you resigning? Who is this man? Are you in a relationship?" But Evelyn didn't break stride. She walked like someone who'd spent too long waiting for permission, like someone who no longer needed it. Next to her, Hank Mercer looked completely out of place and utterly at home. His boots still carried grease. His shirt was wrinkled from work. He didn't wave or smile. He just stayed at her side, quiet and steady. That, more than anything, was what made people stare. Inside a nearby SUV, Garrett Vance sat with the engine idling. He watched them walk toward the jet. Jaw clenched, fingers drumming against the leather door panel. He didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The damage in his eyes had been done. But Evelyn didn't see damage. She saw release. She squeezed Hank's hand. He glanced at her. "You sure?" he asked quietly. "I've never been more sure of anything." They reached the steps of the jet. A flight officer stood at the door, unsure whether to salute or step aside. Evelyn nodded at him gently. Open it up. Inside, the cabin was untouched. White leather seats, glass dividers, a world built for control. But it felt foreign now, like a costume she no longer fit into. They didn't sit across from each other. They sat side by side. When the doors sealed shut and the jet hummed to life again, Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for years. She leaned back, head against the seat, heels abandoned somewhere on the runway. Her hair, once pinned perfectly, now fell loose around her face. She didn't care. Across from them, the pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. "Destination, Miss Stroud?" Evelyn turned to Hank. He raised an eyebrow. She smiled. "Wherever life takes us." The jet began to roll, smooth and silent. Acceleration pulled them gently back as the aircraft lifted off, rising above headlines, noise, and a world that thought it owned her story. They soared higher, through clouds, past expectation, and into something new. 24 hours later, business outlets were still spinning. Articles dissected her every step. TV anchors speculated about her mental state. Investors panicked, then speculated, then panicked again. But Evelyn wasn't watching. She was in a small airfield in Arizona, drinking bitter black coffee from a chipped mug while seated on a toolbox. Hank was across from her, sleeves rolled, hands already back in an engine. Her phone buzzed somewhere in a duffel bag. She ignored it. She'd already answered the only question that mattered. Back in the Stroud Aviation boardroom, the chairs were full, but none of them felt like they held power. Garrett stood at the head, reading a leaked memo on his phone. "No public statement forthcoming," he read aloud. "The company remains stable. Miss Stroud is unavailable for comment." One of the younger execs muttered, "Maybe she finally lost it." But Evelyn's godmother, an older woman with steel-gray hair and eyes like cooled iron, sipped her tea and said nothing. She had seen Evelyn grow up in palaces and cry alone in them. She had watched her rehearse strength for rooms that never deserved it. And now, she watched the world scramble to understand what it meant for a woman to stop performing. She smiled into her teacup. Back in the hangar, Hank handed Evelyn a wrench. She didn't hesitate. Her hands, once used to signing contracts and waving at press, now bore grease and tiny cuts. She loved it. "You really stayed," Hank said. "I said I would." He nodded. Most people ran from discomfort. She had walked into it barefoot. He turned back to the plane. She followed his gaze. A small Cessna, not elegant, not fast, but honest. Built by hands, held together by care. "Where are we flying next?" she asked. "Nowhere today," he said. "But when we do, it won't be in first class." She laughed. "That's all right. I'm not a first-class person anymore." He glanced at her, a smile tugging at his mouth. "You never were." Outside, the wind stirred across the empty airfield. No cameras, no board meetings, no applause, just sky. And for the first time in her life, Evelyn Stroud didn't need anyone to understand her decision, because she had stopped chasing understanding. She had chosen something better. Peace. Sometimes, the person who saves you won't come in a suit or with a spotlight. Sometimes they come in boots, with quiet hands, and no need to be seen. If you've ever been judged for how you look, comment 1. If you believe that character matters more than title, comment 2. And if this story meant something to you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next time the quiet ones prove everyone wrong.